advertised joint meeting of the local planning agency and the town council. It's Tuesday, October 10th, 2023. It's 11 a.m. If you would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There's something about hearing a room full of people give the Pledge of Allegiance. It's very nice. Council, thank you very much for this joint meeting. Just a couple of orders of business. I'm going to first ask you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members, if you prefer to be referred to as council members, Mayor, Vice Mayor, the LPA works informally by first name basis. What's your preference?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, first name basis. Thank you very much. Second, there is going to be public comment. Your public comment is limited to 3 minutes on agenda items. Give you an example. There's a letter up here about short-term rentals. We're not discussing short-term rentals today, so that wouldn't be part of our public comment today. We're going to keep it tight because this is a very lengthy agenda with difficult subject matter. Third, as a matter of organization of the meeting, because we're all chatty, what I'd like to do is as we go topic by topic, have each member say what they've got to say about it before anybody kind of jumps in the second time. It'll kind of keep the conversation focused and hopefully save us some time with back and forth. Okay, does everyone agree? All right. So Jason is here. Sarah's at the table. Nancy and Becky are here. So we'll begin with public comment. So remember that Amy is keeping the time. Remember that you have 3 minutes. Please don't be upset if you hear the timer and I say your time is up. And remember that you have opportunities to speak to everyone and email everyone outside of this meeting. So Amy, who's our first speaker?
Dr. John Farmer, but do you have something to say about what's on the agenda? Your item was not on the agenda.
Get up and speak. I have one item that.
Mr. Farmer, go ahead and come to the microphone.
He had the hand out.
My name is John Farmer. I'm
Yes,
an
sir.
OBGYN physician. My partner and I, Kim Wise, purchased a property at 5809 Louder Street 2 years ago. And I made a trip all the way from Kentucky last night and I have to return tomorrow. So even though short-term rental might not be on your agenda, you're talking about a comprehensive guide for this whole island. And that item is crucial to what I think is important for this island. You want people to come back to this island. You want to help people who have had terrible damage done to their homes. Our property valuations are going to go up because of all the new people coming into the island. And the only way I see that this city is going to generate revenue is going to be to increase revenue through short-term rentals. I mean, that is a way that we can generate money, and it helps everybody on the island, not just big developers. If you look at the law.
So Dr. Farmer, I am going to stop you because we've got a room full of people and this is not on our agenda. And I agree that it is something that is important to people. We'll take a break here shortly and you'll have an opportunity to speak to some of the council members about your issue. But accept my apologies, we have to stick to our agenda today.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for taking the time to make the handout you made also. Who's next, Amy?
John McLean.
Mr. McLean? John? There you are. I didn't see you over there.
Rare for me to prepare
a statement as opposed to just speak to it.
John,
but-
will you pull that microphone closer to you?
Sorry,
Thank
thank
you.
you. John McLean, 237 Egret Street. Thank you all, LPA, council, mayor, vice mayor, and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to provide public comment on how FMB rebuilds and what will be the long-term future of FMB. While there are many very important challenges, considerations, and decisions to be made as we rebuild FMB, some things will be out of our control. We all know that the new buildings will be built back stronger, the infrastructure will be hardened and made more resilient, and yes, it will be more expensive. There are, however, decisions to be made that are within our control, and that's why we are here today. The town incorporated in 1995 in direct response to this very building, and the fact that the residents of FMB had little say in the development of our island. As part of incorporation, in their wisdom, Anita, thank you, the founding
You're
community
welcome.
leaders envisioned a community with a balance between residents, tourists, and commercial interests. We have a comp plan. Should not be drastically changed in the name of faster or more profitable development. We need to look to the future, the long-term future, and we have one chance to get it right. I spent a long time in business in the professional sector. Businesses do not need the most favorable terms. They just need clarity and stability to make investment decisions. Dan, as you recounted at the remembrance, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. That is what I think we should continue to do. I'm not sure if it was Kevin Guthrie that told you that, but it stuck. My largest concern is density, primarily of new hotels. I support maintaining the current density levels and allowing people to build back what they had or what they have by right, and not counting the space under base flood elevation. But every new hotel development plan that has been floated has requested increased density levels of 2x or more. We are all aware of the traffic during season, and season continues to get longer. This island simply cannot safely accommodate more cars. Water taxis, ferries, hotel shuttles, and improved public transportation are all great ideas. They should all be pursued, but they are not enough to fix the traffic situation. I am a fan of the commercial hub approach, and I believe that the downtown district, Santini, and the marinas should all have some leeway to build a walkable commercial district that includes retail, light manufacturing, bars, restaurants, and the arts. I would also support relaxing some of the requirements for smaller businesses around such issues as parking spaces, setbacks, use of rooftop decks. I'm not in favor of allowing density increases for any hotels or motels that are more than 30 or 40 rooms. I think we should all look to Margaritaville as a standard for large development and take into account that Tom has stated that the current Margaritaville design can accommodate 2 additional floors, and he would seek to do so. I've heard comments such as, don't you want access to a new restaurant, tiki bar, or roof deck? Of course I do, but providing public access to a commercial establishment is not a public benefit. In closing, these are important decisions. I'm grateful the town has control over its future, and I implore the LPA and council not to make wholesale changes to the
Thank you
comp
very
plan
much,
or
John.
LPC. Thank you.
Thank you for your thoughts. Amy, who's next?
Tim Shadle. After Mr. Shadle will be James Inc.
Good morning, Tim.
Good morning, Tim Shadle,
Nice to see you again.
property owner now, not a resident anymore, but hopefully be back soon. As you probably can imagine, I had a lot more to say than what was on the agenda because I didn't know that that was going to be the limit. But something I would like to talk about relates to me, actually, that was brought up in the last town council meeting about the allowance for build back for multifamily properties.
Tim,
is that-
I
is
hate
that
to
part
do
of
this
this
to, no, it is
discussion?
not. It is not. If you don't mind, I'm going to cut you off unless you've got something.
Can I float something just, I've
Please,
taken this
go
up
right
to
ahead.
Sarah and maybe it'll be brought up today, but
Okay,
in reference to the build back of multifamily homes, I just wish part of the discussion could be, it's something that I floated in writing to all the council members, but about selling density. I had a triplex and apparently there is a process, but it's never been talked about or put into action, But one of my thoughts was, if I didn't want to build back a triplex, could I build back a duplex and sell my other density unit? I had a legal triplex that is documented with the town, but it was a thought of a way to be able to afford to build back, since I didn't receive enough money from insurance. Maybe I would sell density and build a duplex,
Okay.
which I also could pull a permit for myself, whereas a triplex is a commercial property and a homeowner can't do that.
All right, Tim. Thank you very much
Come
for your
back to
thoughts.
another meeting.
Yes. Mr. Ingram? Or was it Inc.? Was it Jim Inc.?
James Inc.
Oh,
After Mr. Inc. is Tom Torgerson.
Morning, council.
Good morning,
LPA.
Jim.
I am Jim Inc. Family's been on the island since the 50s, not as permanent residents, but as permanent landholders. And I'm also a longtime professional planner, engineer, consultant throughout Florida and a lot in this area. What you're doing today is fantastic. I mean, getting together, starting to get clarity. The biggest thing from the developer side, the consultant side, is clarity. It's important to have that. We've been working on the comp plan. The consultant proposed some FARs that were rather large and were met with, resistance. I think my personal opinion is the comp plan, the way it's right now, is probably 80% correct. There are some areas that you need to look at. Some of those areas is when you get into the nodes, be it Santini, Red Coconut, and downtown, since we've had the storm, does it make sense to change those a little bit? Does it need maybe a little additional height? Maybe not. But the biggest thing that we need from you as a board member is the clarity where we can see it. The process is set up correctly, that in the land development code, the FARs are set, it's underneath the 2.5, but you have an avenue of, you can do a plan development. And a developer can bring a plan development and say, I got a better idea. I think this is great, and this is why. And this is the public benefit, this is why. And then the 5 council members are the ultimate deciders to say, yes, I think that's a good idea or not. But what we need is that clarity, and the clarity that I see in there that really needs to be worked on is the height language, the density language, and the motel factor language. Just for clarity, get it streamlined. What are we actually saying? The rest of your agenda, I'm in support of everything that's there. I personally had some problems with build back, and we're going a different direction. That could have been worked on, but I don't believe that's on the agenda today.
Thank you
you.
very much, Jim.
Tom Torgerson. After Mr. Torgerson will be Lovell Larkin.
Good morning, Tom.
Good morning, Chairwoman, Council,
Mr. Torgerson.
members, and town staff. Tom Torgerson, Fort Myers Beach. The comp plan was originally a highly involved community process and established the type of community and vibe we want to promote. It was known then, having some of the oldest infrastructure in coastal Southwest Florida on Fort Myers Beach, that redevelopment had to occur. And the question was, how do we guide it? Well, that organic evolution had been underway for years before Ian wiped the slate clean. Now, in our lifetimes, we will have the ability to see our barrier island redeveloped as our founding mothers and fathers envisioned. A little history on our side. Andrea Silver Sands Resort was taken by Ian. We struck a deal with her to purchase it and closed upon that the first of this year. In January, we sat down with each counselor and shared our plans for building a boutique resort on that property, which was met with overwhelming support. In February, we met with planning staff, and we didn't even get through our entire slideshow before it was said, Tom and John, of course you can proceed on this course and use the existing comp plan and land development code as you're proposing, or you can wait a bit and we will have a new comp plan and a new land development code by year end, and you will be able to build much more here than you are currently planning. Next comes Eddie. Eddie, a Miami urban planner. His PowerPoint for a new F&B comp plan shocked the island, but many developers took it as gospel. Most of them off-island developers. This is going to be the next South Beach, and proceeded with concepting large-scale commercial resort projects. This joint group, Council LPA, has met twice previous, this subject matter being the center of one of the meetings, but this subject matter being discussed at both of them. And I recall you individually at times going around the table and supporting the community, the small community walkable district that our comp plan dictates, and to not change any of the intensities and densities, only to make tweaks to the plan to allow for more commercial neighborhoods, support nodes infilled in a couple of midpoints on the island. Fast forward to today, we have proposed on the table that literally is a comp plan rewrite, changing and adding volumes of narratives and removing constraints on density intensity in the land development code. Adding to this is an expediting process for changing zoning, for getting variances, deviations, et cetera, that bypass the land development code and gives council discretion to approve literally just about anything the way this is written. Remember, the comp plan, as it's being proposed, becomes virtually powerless. Focusing for a moment just on resort transient, during the life of our town, under its guidance, resorts have been developed to include Pink Shell, Edison House, Harbor House, and now Margaritaville, all within parameters of the comp plan. If this package, and I call it a package, is passed, the current Pink Shell proposal to expand that mammoth proposal, they not only do not currently have the density to do it or do any of it, they would be able to do more than what they're proposing by right.
Tom, if you could wrap
Margaritaville-
up, please.
And Margaritaville, as an example, if it was going through the process under what's being proposed here today, could be 625 room. You know, Miami Beach, here we come. Thank you for your time. I really respect the weight that's on your shoulders. You didn't get elected for this exact situation, but you're handling it with grace. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Lovell?
Lovell. After Ms. Larkin will be Rebecca Link.
Hi,
Good morning.
good morning. Lavelle Larkin, 122
Oh,
Miramar.
Lavelle.
I
always call
I
you
go
Love.
by it anyway.
Yeah, me too.
So,
Go ahead.
okay, first, thank you all for serving our little community during these trying times. My father first came to, I'm going to try to do this without crying. My father first came to this island 50 years ago, and the beach soon became a part of my life. At the time we lived in Kentucky, our stay began at the Neptune Inn. We ate at the shrimp box and we fished for snook in the back bay. My dad eventually invested in various properties on the beach. He owned and operated the Estero Island Inn as a family community for many years with his business partner, Carl Nichols. It became my home away from home, my oasis. The property I own on Miramar has been in my family for over 50 years. I recently moved to Fort Myers planning to build my permanent home on that lot, on my little island paradise. And then came Ian. I listened to all of you as you expressed your support of staying within our current comp plan in LDC. You said you wanted to support our quirky, laid-back vibe, community, and school. Many of you speak of your involvement in construction. You all know the importance of first securing your structure. Your building will fail if you don't support your roof and walls. This is also true of our fragile environment on this island. I cringe when I hear members balk at the importance of our structures and streets, using ambient lighting and taking on measures to protect our wildlife and shorebirds. It pains me when I hear projects that will infringe on our canals and mangroves, which serves as barriers to protecting this barrier island and the residents who own properties along those canals. As has frequently been pointed out, most residents and businesses will gain density on rebuilding. Our short-term rental business will return. Hotels and condos will return. Our traffic will return. Our infrastructure will have to support the existing and future development. Developers can and will make money building within current restrictions. They know that. That is why they are here. Please maintain the current comprehensive plan and LTC. We can live with tweaks, but don't set a precedence that will destroy the island and community that brought us all here in the first place. Thank you.
That was lovely. Thank you, Lavelle. You did a good job. Okay,
Rebecca Link, and
Good morning,
after
Rebecca.
Miss Link will be Ellen Vaughn.
good morning.
I'm Rebecca Link. I own two properties. One is on Williams Drive, and I feel blessed to have this property. It was built by a very important general in World War II. And I have letters that he wrote his wife, and he talks about this is where we're going to build our dream home. And he took aerial pictures because he was in the Air Force. He was also part of the atomic bomb drop, but that's another day. But anyway, a very
Thank
historic
goodness.
piece. And I also own a piece of property on Glenview. So we continue the dream that this man had when there was nothing else here. We have pictures that he took from his plane with handfuls of property. I would like to ask you to please maintain the comp plan. The vision that people had before is the same vision we all bought here for. Our little, $500,000 property that took everything we had is now worth millions. We're grateful, but we don't need it to be worth 10 million. So we want to be able to get from one end of the island to the other without a lot of traffic. And we ask you to please keep that in mind when you think about density. Some of the proposals that we have seen, I think, are absolutely beautiful. The Arches project, to me, is gorgeous. But I think, oh, dear God, when I hear them talking about, oh, we could have more visitors come here and be on the bay and look out, I think, oh, more visitors who aren't staying here. They're helping him make money, but we're sitting in their traffic. The beautiful pier presentation, absolutely gorgeous. But then when I heard them say, it can sit 800 to 8,000 people, I'm like, good, let's bring more people over. Before you know, we're going to need a toll bridge like Sanibel to keep people out because we can only handle so much. So my only request is please consider traffic. Please consider traffic when you're thinking about density. That's it. Thank
Rebecca,
you very
thank
much.
you very much for your comments. Ellen?
Ellen Vaughn. After Miss Vaughn is Ron Fleming.
Good morning, Ellen.
Ellen Vaughn from living in, well, not right now, but 7500 Estero Boulevard is my legal address, though I can't live there right now. Like many of you, I'm experiencing that. I want to echo what many of the previous speakers have said, in particular what John McLean said. I thought he said it very eloquently, followed by what Tom Torgerson said. We all are very well aware we live on one 7-mile-long island that's not even a half-mile wide. We have one road. We have infrastructure that can only support so much building and so much density. I implore you to maintain the spirit of the comprehensive plan as it was so well written and has been updated over the years. A major overhaul would be, in my view, a really disastrous thing to have happen here. So I appreciate your service, and I appreciate how difficult this all is for all of you. And thank you, and I know you'll do the right thing.
Thank you, Ellen.
Ron
Ron Fleming?
Yep, and after Ron Fleming will be Fred Drovlik.
Okay. Good morning, Mr. Fleming, Commissioner. Always with the Crocs, the crazy Croc man.
Hi, Ron Fleming. I'll get right to the point. The infrastructure, it's been said before, that we are going to have development. It's coming. Moss Marina, currently down there, I bet on that entire property, there's about, if there's a dozen, 12. That's a lot. But there's a proposal for hundreds of hotels. Any redevelopment of that scale, the developer has to be responsible for the infrastructure. Make them responsible. And can our island even handle it? You know, those are decisions that you have to make and consider. I'm glad I don't have to do that. There are so many really nice looking projects, but is that what we really want? And of course, traffic. You have to try to figure something out. I would be all in favor of the toll bridge, but then you're working with the state. Good luck with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Fred? Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you, everybody, for this time.
Thank you.
I'm speaking here today as a planning consultant professional, 22-year resident of Lee County, and often visitor of Fort Myers Beach and timeshare owner on the south end of the island. So I enjoy, time here every year. I want to speak to the specific, three of the specific agenda items today. First one being a support for the changing of transient hotel units from density to FAR. I think this is good planning. Then there's a couple of important items on that. If hotel remains tied to density, understanding as a consultant, the developer side of it, I think it's more likely to have condos develop at those densities than they are hotels. So if those density and FAR isn't separated, I think it's going to have condos, which increase density and permanent residence in obviously a storm area and a coastal high hazard area. So I think hotels, this policy encourages hotels, and hotels are beneficial, even though I know it's not a popular opinion, but they are beneficial that they do not increase permanent density in high-risk zones, built to standards that allow for sheltering, increase tax base, and capture tourist dollars, which support local businesses. So I think the policy is good planning. Detaches density from commercial uses, makes it clear, and it's a standard regulatory approach that is more common, at least in my profession. And the detachment allows the established FAR to effectively provide the floor area needed for the redevelopment purposes. And I'll get to a little bit that here in just a second. The activity center boundaries, interesting proposals. The discussions on FAR I agree with. Overall, I know there's ceilings on the FAR with the 1, 1.5, 2.5, and that the discussion is we're not raising the FAR on the island. I get that. I agree. The FAR is actually the FARs work. Most people couldn't get to those FARs. With development, some of these changes are helping that happen. I think that greatly encourages redevelopment in a smart way. I do want to address the boundaries of the activity centers. I think there are appropriate areas where the FAR should be increased over its current designation by creating new or extended activity centers. In particular, the proposed theater and arts district, I think, is a wonderful idea, especially me spending most of my time on the south end of the island. I love the idea. Encourage uses such as retail, restaurants, outdoor dining, venue spaces, theaters, artisanal retail, galleries, music, dance studios. And this has been successful in a lot of communities to generate a really unique area. The district proposes a development intensity of 1.0 FAR. I suggest considering what it takes for like a theater and arts district to really succeed. Often these are unique areas that take activity, density, people, and tourist dollars. People that are willing to spend money to capture that moment that they loved in this unique and wonderful place of Fort Myers Beach. And hotels generate that, whereas as opposed to condominiums that may or may not be occupied full-time, have renters and different types of uses, those tourist dollars, those people spending a week or 2 weeks here, want to capture that in something unique through art and other things that are unique to Fort Myers Beach, I think are wonderful. So what I want to propose is to consider extending that district across the road to across Estero Boulevard and allow more FAR on that side, maybe a 2.5 FAR on that side to encourage that and hotel use and bring in those tourists just to that area to encourage that arts and theater district. I think it would help create that critical mass to make that district actually a reality instead of just something that's pretty on paper in a comp plan. And you consider these things, there's a desire to have public restaurants and other commercial activities that are open to residents and visitors as part of these new hotels and resorts. And those require floor area and a higher FAR. So the additional FAR will encourage and allow this to happen, especially as part of those contributions of the public realm as those get discussed. I think that higher FAR in that right place, which I believe that area of the South End Island may be that right place because it's higher density, it's more heights, it's already there. I think to make this be a catalyst area for that theater and arts, I think that could be a solution.
Thank you, Fred.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Barbara Hill. After Ms. Hill is Nancy Walker.
Barbara, I hate to do this with you coming up. I don't mean it specifically for you, but when you all hear that, wah, 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 that means your time's up. It's not just Amy's phone. Yeah, it's obnoxious enough to let you know. And as another aside, there's snacks over there if anybody feels like you got to have a little nibble, okay? Go ahead, Barbara.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Barbara Hill, and I've been a long-term resident of the beach, both as a teenager back in the 50s and now as a senior citizen, being here for 18 years. I admire all that you are doing on behalf of our Fort Myers Beach Island. It is a crucial time for all of us in terms of what goes next. I applaud what you think you've already decided going forward. I have one question, however, about this maintaining of the beach views and the view corridors. While I think conceptually that makes sense, but what I've seen when a person builds a home and they have the view corridor, they put in landscaping, they put in privacy fences, so virtually none of the beach is viewed from Estero Boulevard. That, I think, is something that has to be addressed. I don't know how you enforce this creation of the beach view. I want you to keep the comp plan to the extent that it's doable for us, but also keep in mind the mixed-use development concepts in our neighborhood zones that actually will allow for residents to enjoy restaurants and shops and walkable neighborhoods. All of that to me is good. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
Nancy Walker.
Okay. Hi, Nancy. Who's after Nancy, Amy?
That's all I have signed up.
Okay. That doesn't, you could still speak, but go ahead. Thank you, Nancy.
Hi, I'm Nancy Walker. I didn't prepare anything, but I want to thank the people that did the original comp plan. Anita, I know you were part of it. They have protected us. Hopefully we'll continue to protect us. We're not in a situation like Captiva, where Lee County is going to rule whatever. I don't think we should change the FAR. That's why we're here. That's why many of us came here. I started coming here over 50 years ago. We originally bought on Marco, and we didn't like the big, tall buildings on the beach. We didn't like the vibe in Marco, and we love the vibe on Fort Myers Beach. It's as close to Key West as you can get in the state of Florida. It is. And recently, we just went down to Key West on the ferry. And, you know, now you look at things differently, having lived through this, right? What would they do if they got 16 feet of water, and how would they rebuild? But then I thought, walking through Bahama Village and all the little conch houses and the cigar houses, keep that in mind when you're doing this plan, because that's what I love. That's why I love Key West. That's why I loved Fort Myers Beach. And I think we should stick to our plan that we have, allowing for flood changes for FEMA, we're going to have to do anyway. And also try and keep the beachfront development, such as the large complexes, down as much as we can. We held Tom Torgerson's feet to the fire with Margaritaville. That should be our basis, our goal, and everything else should follow at that level. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Okay, those are the only people who have submitted cards, but is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Excuse me. Hi, my name is Jean Marie Guzzi. I'm
Hi,
a resident
Jean.
of Fort Myers Beach and on Anchorage Street. And this gives me extreme anxiety, but I'm doing this because listening, I would love for you just to keep the comp plan. Why change what was designed? Why did you incorporate? I'm sorry, but the 47 pages that I tried to read through felt a bit like you were potentially going to give away the farm, which I really don't want to see done. And so sorry, you actually helped me out as an absolute no for the FAR. Like, don't go there, because we don't need more density. If it comes to the point where Moss Marina is going to stay Moss Marina, I'm good with that. I don't need a new 400 hotel rooms, what it's going to do to us and the drive. So I guess I'm just saying, please seriously think about how it's going to affect. I know the mayor has talked, you have talked. It's all going to affect us. And there's only that one pipe, as Dan likes to say, I don't refer, I'm sorry, first name Dan, but that one pipe that's bringing all that sewer. So, you know, so I appreciate if you can try and stick to the plan, the existing plan.
Thank you very much for being scared. You did a good job. You're welcome. Steve, good morning. That's okay.
Glad I caught it though. So my name's Steve Johnson, and I've been a 13-year resident of Fort Myers Beach. And I'm speaking also on behalf of a lot of our neighbors who aren't able to attend. But in general, the community is abjectly against increasing density and intensity on this island. If you think about what the value is to homeowners and the community residents, there really isn't a value at all. You might have a taco shop, you might have a place a little closer to get some coffee, but in general, you know, increasing the regulations or the LDC and changing the comp plan really benefits commercial interests. And in general, commercial interests don't really benefit our island from a community standpoint, right? They basically pay taxes, real estate taxes. But outside of that, there's really not a lot of extra income unless, of course, you're employed at one of these developments. It makes us feel very uncomfortable that it seems like this is almost a de facto comp plan that's being brought forth. We were 2/3 through a comp plan with our consultant Eddie, which I'm not sure was really received very well to the point that we were pulled into it as a resident. In addition, typically that procedure should be a very judicious, community-driven procedure to foresee what the future holds for this community above and beyond all as the taxpayers in the community. So it feels, you know, there's many of us that were very uncomfortable that really 12 people in the community are starting to decide and change land development codes, now making comp plan adjustments without really the extended community here to address or I should say, provide input into the process. Typically, all stakeholders are present. There's stakeholder meetings, and there's usually a large to-do around a new comp plan. And I think this sort of de facto having meetings, and I know there'll be more involved with that, but in general, as a community, more density, more intensity is not going to help the traffic situation, the environment, the ability to get to doctor's visits, just the additional bodies and cars on this island. I mean, all of you are residents and you know what it's already like. So if you compound that, it just will make this tranquil, small island that attracted us all almost unbearable to live in. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. Dr. Farmer, could I ask you a question? Your phone is doing this blinking thing. I don't know if it's when it comes in a call or something, it goes blink, 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 blink. Can you turn that off or flip it upside down? Because every time it does it, I go, what is that? Thank you so much. He silenced his phone, but it's that blinky thing is. I'm sure it does. All right, well, thank you.
I do have an active Florida medical license, and my plan is to open an active.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Farmer. Is there anybody else? Lori, you just stood up. Lori Albion? Anybody want to speak after Lori? Okay, I saw a hand go. Is that you, Karen?
Hi, thank you. My name's Lori Albion. I'm with SBN Commercial Partners, and I represent a couple of very small hotel owners on the beach. They bought their properties last year. One of them closed actually in June 15th, and then was wiped out with the storm. And they're very challenged. They really want to rebuild, but they're very challenged with what they're facing with the rebuild process because so much has changed. Since so many hotels were built, we've got new elevations, we've got new bathroom requirements. They're going to have stairs and elevators and all this other stuff that doesn't fit on the footprint of what they currently had. So I appreciate you looking at this issue with the smaller hotels and considering the change to FAR, because that will allow them to fit more on the property that they didn't have to worry about before. Like I said, stairways, hotels, elevators, so much that wasn't there before that makes it difficult to fit in that little footprint that they used to have. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Lori. Karen? Anyone wish to speak after Karen? Okay.
Good morning. I want to reiterate what I've heard here pretty much from many of
Can
the
you stand where you
speakers.
say your name for the record?
Sorry, yeah.
That's okay.
Karen Swanbeck, island resident and business owner around the island since 1991. But I wanted to speak actually because I was a part of the incorporation movement. I participated in the charrettes years ago when the original comp plan was created. Obviously, there's been some changes along the way. But one of the things that has just resonated with me so much since the damage and destruction from Hurricane Ian is how yet again, our community, for the most part, many of us seem to be speaking with the same voice. When we created the original charrettes, we had these groups all around at the old town hall, and we had these boards and everybody was working together. And at the end of the day, we looked and everybody pretty much had the same ideas for the island. And it was amazing. And as I've started to have a lot of conversation with a lot of property owners, I know there's a lot of challenges and I know you all will see through what needs to happen, but the community is speaking with the same voice. You know, people invested in that vision that was created 28 years ago. This is what they love, and this is what's so special to all of us. So I know you'll do the right thing, but I just wanted to share that experience.
Thank you very much, Karen. Anyone else? Anyone else wish to speak? Okay, we'll close the public comment. And thank you all very much for taking your time to come here and visit with us today and be a part of this process. We appreciate it. Okay, so the first section of the agenda, I'm gonna state what it says on the agenda for those of you who don't know, okay? Because I suspect there's a bunch of you that don't have an agenda. So the first part of the agenda says what we think is already decided. And the first item on that is keeping the floor area ratio, which is FAR, and density at the current levels. So, Dan, can I start with you?
Sure. Well, I'll go first, I guess.
And we don't
no,
have
that's
to be long.
Nope,
It doesn't
I
have
will-
to be long. Just tell us so we can get a consensus, because our goal is to get a consensus on each one of these items.
I think what we heard here today and what I've heard in speaking with every single person that I've talked to, with the exception of one that was up there today, they have spoken to me very loud and clear. I've said since the beginning, the comp plan as it was written 28 years ago allowed for things to happen. Some of the developments that we heard about already today. And I think it's important to point out that in the last 2 months, almost $100 million was spent on 2 commercial properties on the island. Doing so knowing they could do, or they could potentially do within the current comp plan, or ask for something different. I don't think you invest that kind of money if you don't think it can work. So just to kind of shorten it up, I stand by what I said at our very first meeting. I support keeping the FAR and density at its current levels as written in the comp plan.
Okay, thank you. Doug, how about you? And Andy and Frank, thanks so much for putting out those chairs. Folks, if you'd like to come and sit down, Steve, if you guys would like to sit down, that'd be great. Doug, do you have any thoughts? Do you agree or disagree about keeping it?
Thank you. I agree. I think we can use the example of Margaritaville as a project that was built with the current FAR rules. and, achieved, I think, Mr. Torgenson's investors' objectives, and I think the town is satisfied with the results, and I'm not sure I see a reason to change.
Thank you, Doug. How about you, Don?
Yeah, I echo what Doug said and what Mayor Aller said. We've heard it loud and clear. I've heard it over and over again from the community, and I think Margaritaville is a good example, right, of what can be done with the current density and FAR.
Thank you. Scott, how about you?
I agree on the most part, but I still think there should be some caveats on these new nodes to get a little bit of incentive to build that quicker. And we're going to talk about the overlays as well. I think there needs to be a little bit of FAR adjustment for especially smaller properties.
Okay, thank you, Scott. And Jim, what about you?
I concur with what has been said so far. The community, I think, is very clear that they want to keep the floor area ratio and density that is currently in the comp plan intact. And except for some Ian required changes, that the comp plan shouldn't be modified too much.
Thank you, Jim. Jane? Oh, sorry.
I agree. I still think that that leaves a lot open for height because there is no restriction on the height.
In the comp plan, yeah, this is specifically FAR and density. How about you, Jim?
I support keeping the floor area ratio and density levels at the current levels.
Karen?
So I'm a little bit on both sides. Yes, the FAR and density, I think we have a problem with density. If we try to increase it, we don't have the infrastructure to increase it. And kind of brings back what someone said about, if there's any increase in density, it should be on the builder to make it work, but I just don't see that it is here right now. I do also look at certain nodes and small commercial. And when I say small commercial, I'm talking about the build back of small commercial, which right now they can't. So looking at the FAR for that, because of all the FEMA restrictions and that kind of thing, for people who had businesses here before, that makes sense to me.
And Bill?
I agree with the mayor. I think keeping the FAR and density at their current levels.
John?
I'm comfortable keeping FAR and density at the current levels.
Okay, I absolutely want to keep the floor area ratio and the density at its current levels. So what I'd like to ask you, Sarah, Becky, Nancy, whatever staff would like to opine, to put that issue to rest. Would you like the mayor, the LPA's vote, we're advisory, so the council has now heard our positions. Would you like for the mayor to ask for a vote of the council to memorialize that? So that issue has been settled, or would you just like us to go to the next one?
I would say that I've heard you. We're going to go back and make any amendments to this. I don't know that there is any necessary reason to make a vote on this. All the language will be coming back to you as LPA members and then you as council members.
How do you feel about that, Dane?
Well, I'd like to ask our town attorney what her opinion is. To me, I think having a vote actually sends a stronger message that this is the voice of the council, current council.
It is a policy decision that you can vote on. And yeah, I agree that if you do take a vote, it will have more of an effect. Among the community members.
Okay. With that, I will ask if there is a motion to keep the FAR and density at the current levels as listed in the comp plan.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We got a motion by Councilor Veach, seconded by Councilor Woodson. Discussion? Councilor King, I'm sorry.
Councilor King.
Sorry.
They're
Okay.
so close.
We moved around. I know.
In size even.
Councilor Woodson, how you have grown.
Jim, you were going to make a comment.
No, I just thought it might be helpful for educational purposes for staff just to lay out what the FAR and density levels currently are, just so people know what we're voting on.
Sarah, would you like to answer that question?
So it varies from future land use district to future land use district. The maximum is in the pedestrian
Commercial on Old San Carlos.
Yes, and the maximum is currently 2.5. However, you cannot get that by right. The zoning districts that exist within that are between 1.8 to 1, and you can request higher levels of FAR through the CPD process, the commercial plan development process. So the highest one is 2.5. The rest of them are in the 1.2, 1.8 range.
And when you say the rest of them, could you just elaborate a little bit on how that works on the island, Sarah?
There are future land use districts that cover the entire island. The most dense one is the pedestrian commercial, which is our downtown area. It extends, I believe, up to here Diamond Head. Within that region, the maximum FAR is 2.5. The remainder of the island, there's a map over there on the wall, and then there's a map at the back. Those are our existing future land use maps. The dark red is
Well, I'm just going to, the zoning districts are residential single family, residential conservation, residential multifamily, commercial resort, commercial marina, commercial office, institutional, community facilities, Bay Beach, downtown, Santini, Village, which is Red Coconut, Commercial Boulevard, and of course CPD. So each one of those has its own, or no, because of the overlay.
Yes, so the island is broken up into future land use districts. Then there are zoning districts that are within those future land use districts. There are fewer future land use districts than zoning districts. And the future land use district has broader requirements, and then the zoning districts have more specific requirements. So the future land use district has, for example, in the pedestrian commercial, has a maximum of 2.5. But then within that, we have Santini, which has a maximum FAR of 1, and then we have the downtown, and that is between 1 and 1.8. All of the districts are similarly situated in that the future land use district allows a higher FAR, and then the specific zoning districts within them have a lower FAR. So if you are within a zoning district and you would like to request a higher FAR, then you come to the LPA and the council and you request to do an RPD, which is a residential plan development, or a CPD, a commercial plan development. And through that process, you can request that higher FAR. You also can request changes to the land development codes, such as height, changes in setback, changes in parking. Usually when you're going through a CPD or RPD process, you're going to be providing some benefit to the community in exchange for increases in density, increases in intensity, and it's a back and forth process to ensure that everybody at the end is happy with the development.
Thank you, sir. I just think that's helpful for the public so they know exactly what we're voting on today. Thank you.
So I do have a question now before we vote, because I was taking a bunch of notes yesterday, my 7 hours of reading this. So right now, the FAR calculations, the details are in the LDC. We're not talking about LDC at all right now. We're talking about strictly comp plan and changing any of those FAR and density calculations. Okay. And
I'm shaking my head. Sarah, do you want to affirm that?
Yes, that is correct. Today, we're trying to stick to the comprehensive plan so that we can get through these things. And then once we rewrite our comprehensive plan, we can make any code changes that are needed or wanted to the land development code.
Okay. And then my second question is on our next item, which is B, which is allowing parking on the ground level to not count towards FAR and built to 3 feet. So this vote would not include that, because we had talked about keeping that ground floor open and adding and not counting a ground floor if it's strictly parking or something to be included in the FAR.
So the reason this was included is because it really does play into the FAR calculation. We've had several discussions. It seemed as if the council wanted to not include FAR, but I think it's an important thing to consider when you're coming up with whether the current FAR makes sense and you want to keep it, or if you want to make any changes. Because if you're changing the way it's calculated, you need to consider that also. So we kind of wanted this as a package to discuss FAR and how you count FAR, because they do impact each other.
That's the council.
Any other discussion?
I would just kind of say, and I was going to bring this up in the next item for Karen, but if the intent is to not increase the FAR, then B de facto increases the FAR.
Well, let's get through A first, and then we'll get to B. Any other discussion? There's a motion by Counselor Veach, seconded by Counselor King. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Madam Chair?
Okay, so thank you, Dan. So we'll move on to one of the many elephants in the room, where you hit the head on the nose or the whatever, Karen. Yeah. So allowing parking on ground level to not count towards the floor area ratio if built to 3 feet above the base flood elevation, which is BFE, when you hear that. Karen, you're right. It does increase the FAR of that particular project. So I have read, like you, so much over the past few days. And you know how I always do this, with my piece of paper? Well, I have been wrong about something, because when we're calculating FAR currently, so let's say that this is now our whole calculation, ground floor up. When we originally, and Jane was on the LPA back in the day when we did this, when we originally calculated, we set the FAR levels because we were counting parking. And I actually found minutes and notes and sent an email to someone who helped in that planning effort to say, why did we do this? The levels of the FAR were set where they are because we included parking. Had the LPA had 2 options: don't include parking and the FAR was lower, or include parking and the FAR is what it is today. At the time, according to everything I read, at the time, it seemed easier to understand to have this box that was ground floor up, right? Even though FAR, floor area ratio, for me has been a difficult enigma from day one, because you can't really put your hands on it. It's sort of like a cloud. So now we've all talked about raising our box up, because base flood, the hurricane and everything else. So we've talked about raising our box up. But what we're really doing is raising our box up and adding this square footage to this box. That's what we're really doing. We're increasing the floor area ratio of the ability to increase the floor area ratio here by elevating it, by not counting the parking. So it isn't just, over the years, we've heard a lot of, why are you counting my parking against me? I've said it myself, and it never has made sense. And it isn't really that parking is counted against you. It's been the methodology that we've used for that calculation of FAR. Yes, and so here we are, Sarah, Jason, and staff looking for a clarification of this, because if we don't wish to effectively increase floor area ratio, then how do we accomplish our desire for this? And I'm going to throw out an idea, just because I had this idea about 3 o'clock this morning. is there a way that we could, as part of a CPD, because look, all of our big projects are going to come in as CPDs. I mean, they're just likely all of them will be CPDs. Is there a way as part of a CPD to allow for that ground floor not to be counted? Do you know what I'm saying? So it's like you talk about these stair steps and things like this.
Just if it's parking.
Correct. Is there a way to achieve that without making a broad sweeping change, which, how do we make that change?
Madam Chair?
Yep.
If I may interrupt for just a second. I want to make sure we're not putting the cart before the horse. You use the word intent. If our intent is to do what is written on the page, I don't know that we've asked everybody if that is their intent.
Okay.
I think before we get that clarification, maybe if you think it's worth
absolutely.
asking the intent. before we-
Absolutely, absolutely. So, John, could I start with you?
No.
I notice you like to be last. Start with Karen. I'll start over here. I'll start with that because we've talked about this a lot. Doug, what's your comment on this?
Well, I think, new or rebuilding is going to require the first floor to be pretty far off the ground because of the FEMA rules. And we've heard people talk about, I want to rebuild my boutique hotel, but I can't. I think that allowing the area under a building that's not occupied doesn't have to be parking. It could be just whatever, open, is not really usable floor space on the building. And maybe shouldn't count toward the FAR. But I do have a question for Sarah. This sentence says, allowing parking on the ground level not to count towards FAR if built to 3 feet above base flood elevation. Do we mean if the first floor is built 3 feet above flood elevation?
Yes, so that's basically taking advantage of the flood code requirements that if you're meeting the 3 feet above base flood elevation, that's considered to be the safest option. And we don't count that height, that additional 3 feet towards your building height. But if you wanted to build 4 feet or 5 feet higher, those additional feet above 3 feet would count towards your building height. Otherwise, your building height starts at the base flood elevation plus.
You might want to insert in that sentence that if the first floor is built 3 feet, because the way it reads, it sounds like if the parking was built
Right,
3
that's
feet
the way I
above,
read it
which
as well.
sort of
Okay.
confusing.
Yes, no, that's a good catch. Thank you.
But I think it does, Anita, it does increase the calculation, but maybe it also addresses some of the other concerns we heard, which do have some validity that if you're going to rebuild, you're not rebuilding the same structure that you had. And you do have to address FEMA code and Florida building code for that matter, which makes it complicated. So that's my thought.
Thank you, Doug. And Don?
Yeah, similar. My thought my thought about our intent was that parking would not count, and agree that it would technically increase the FAR, but I felt like it was required because some structures, a lot of structures, were built on the ground and they will no longer have usable space on the first floor, and certainly some of the small boutique hotels and the smaller. I mean, everything on this island pretty much was a small building, so that was my thought, that it was, in fact, parking was not going to count.
This one's important to you, Scott.
Yeah, I totally agree. You should not count parking in your FAR calculation at all.
Jim?
By adopting this rule, I think we would be giving away as a matter of right some of the FAR. I think there probably are other avenues, variances, CPD, somewhere else where an applicant could make that request, but not giving it to them as a matter of right.
Can I go back? So the more restrictive you are in all these things, the less little lots are going to be able to build. All you're doing by doing this, by being more restrictive, is all these little lots are going to be condensed into big projects. And I keep hearing CPD, CPD, CPD. Do you know how much a CPD costs? You're by doing this, by not allowing this, you're cutting all the little guys out. It's just going to be big projects with CPDs. And we're going to have either empty lots or big projects. So you've got to give some leeway to little guys. And I think this is one way of doing that, is by not calculating the FAR for parking.
Dan?
Well, I agree with a little bit of what Scott said there, but I think you have to look at the other side of the coin. Yes, you're correct in what you said, but if you do it by right through the comp plan, you have now just given that same right to everyone else that has the ability to amass property. And I think that is what we've heard from our constituents, is we don't want that. The way the current comp plan is written, it allows you, and I don't want to speak for Sarah, but I believe what you said is there are avenues in which you can take to achieve more outside of the comp plan. What we're talking about here is the comp plan and the willingness to allow more or not. I think we just spoke that we did not want to allow more. I've always had reservations with this one because I've always known or always thought that it's inherently going to increase the FAR. If you allow it, you're going to get a bigger, you've heard me say 1,000 times, how big of a box? Do we care what's in the box? We talk about it all the time. This will increase the size of that box by right through the comp plan. And if you do this, I think there will be more to follow. What's next? Heights, setbacks through the land development code. What else is going to be addressed? So I do not support this. I think there are other avenues in place. Our forefathers, I think, had it right. It's been proven over multiple buildings that have been built that it can be done. I understand it is costly, but there is a process. I just don't think globally making a change through the comp plan to allow this is the directions our constituents want to go.
Jane?
Now you got me sitting on a fence.
You can't pull a John King, I'm sorry.
Okay. Is there a way that we could identify a smaller structure and put it in a different category so that they would have the ability to not count it, and anything larger than, 30 units, 50 units, whatever, would have to count it?
If I can, Madam Chair, just step in real quick. Sarah, is this something that both what Scott and Jane have brought up, is this something that we can address at a later date through a land development code as opposed to a comp plan?
Yes,
Okay.
you can address this at a later date. We thought it was important just because they are so tied together. But if you would rather wait on this particular component, that is possible.
And I think that was what I was trying to make the point, is that this isn't closing the door on potential opportunities to achieve the goal I think that all of us want. But we have to stick to, I believe, the greater bubble, if you will, that we're talking about in the comp plan.
Mr. Etter?
Did I understand the mayor correctly to defer this then to the LDC conversation, or do you want to finish this conversation?
No, what I'm saying is I cannot support doing this simply because it makes it then a global thing across every part of the island. If we bring this up at a later date, these discussions under the land development code, I'm much more supportive of doing it that way versus making the big global change of the Bible, if you will, that is the comp plan.
I think I understand the nuance there. I think it puts us in an awkward situation. We all acknowledge the problem, but we've not seen the minutia or the detail of the solution. So I think it's awkward to vote at this point. I mean, I understand if there can be a solution found in the LDC, that's great. But until we see that solution and flush it out, it's hard to vote exactly as to whether it should be part of the comp plan or not. So I'm gonna listen more and hope we have a little bit more granular detail in the future.
Karen? So I think where this comes into play
and correct me if I'm wrong, Becky, but in the comp plan, we've talked about these development, what they call it, development agreements with deviations, and they're on the agenda for later on today. Kind of that overlay concept, that pink zone concept, but it's already in our comp plan to flesh that out. So if we look at something like development agreements with deviation and do that for existing smaller, looking at them almost separately than new builds and new developments, but this is more along the redevelopment phase, then I would totally agree with giving adjustments to that. But if we're not going to build out this deviation, help me here.
Okay, the development agreement with deviations is part of the land development code.
Part of the land development,
As
okay.
opposed to the comp plan, and
Okay.
everything has to comply with the comp plan. And I just mentioned to Sarah, which she obviously knows, we have to be very, very careful about the definitions that we put in the comp plan, with regard to how we're going to define floor area ratio so that we can appropriately make the tweaks in the land development code going forward.
So then my other question is, with the development agreements with deviation, that would not require a CPD per se, but it is required, it can be part of the land development code?
Karen, can we talk about that when we get to that issue? Because I have a lot of
Well,
questions on that
Well, it
one
makes a
too.
difference of how B affects everything.
Do you want to answer that, Becky? I see what I see what she's saying.
Okay.
But it really is, the bottom line is comp plan LDC.
Yeah, it's not apples and lawn chairs, it's oranges and apples, okay? I mean, they're very similar, but the twains shall never meet. We have to, I don't think we want to put an issue like the development agreement with deviations into the comp plan. There's no
Okay.
need for it.
Okay, Becky, just,
Yes.
I think both Doug, Don, and Scott made very eloquent arguments that FEMA and the state building code is sort of forcing the hand of these folks to raise their buildings. So we have a philosophical debate now as to whether we solve that in the comp plan or we solve that in the LDC. If there's a way, is there a way to address what Scott said and what Don and Doug have said in the LDC? And if so, I'm fine with that. But if we can't, then it may need to go in the comp plan. So I guess, could you give us a little clarity on that?
We just have to be very, very careful about how the comp plan is written, the parts about the floor area ratio, so that it gives the ability to, obviously things have changed dramatically with Ian and the changes over time with all the elevations that are required. And we just need to write the comp plan in recognition of that so that we can have the appropriate provisions in the land development code that allows for what we were talking about over here.
Madam Chair, if I may just jump in there, and I'm trying to help Vice Mayor Adderall, I don't know, trying to help clarity, or maybe I'm muddying the waters. I think it can be achieved, and I don't want to speak for anyone here, but I hear there is almost unanimous support, if there isn't unanimous support, to do exactly what you three have brought up, and I think we all want to get those businesses back. I think Sarah has made it very clear that we can achieve that through the land development code, and I think there will be a lot of support to make sure that we get the wording we need to address these issues. However, this particular thing, and I don't want to speak for you, Becky, but basically what you're saying is be careful by putting stuff like this in here, because it then becomes allowable to everyone, not just the ones that we're talking about specifically. So I don't know if that helps ease anybody's mind that there's a willingness, at least from this counselor, to want to address these issues, but I think it needs to be done through the land development code, to Becky's point, to be very careful of what we put into the comp plan by right.
And I appreciate that, Mr. Mayor, but I guess what I'm trying to find out is can we accomplish it in the LDC without forcing people through a CPD? Or will they, in order to accomplish it through the land development code, will they be forced through a CPD?
I think the land development code can be written so that you have so many different possibilities of overlays, and you already have just a multitude, many more zoning districts than most municipalities, 10 times your size. So you can have the land development code, pick and choose where things can go. And to the mayor's point, it is possible to allow certain things for developments of certain sizes. All those things could go in the land development code, but I'd urge you not to put the details in
the comp plan.
In the comp plan. I mean, the comp plan is for the overarching policy. The details go in the land development code. and
Sarah,
I'd
do you have
urge
anything
do
to
that.
add to that?
No, I agree completely. We
Okay.
do not need to address this here. We were just trying to include it to see if there was clarity on this and if it impacted your decision on A. A is necessary. B can be moved to the land development code. We have more flexibility. We can spend some more time working on the details of that there.
Bill, do you have any comments on this?
Yeah, I think that, you have to, it's basically an incentive, right? And I understand there's an advantage to particularly the smaller property owners to being able to effectively increase as FAR. But I think that what you would also be doing is you'd be encouraging people to put parking under their building, which in some ways works well, but then it also takes the street level activity away. So if people are essentially getting, if they're incentivized to fill up their entire ground floor with parking, and they're in the downtown district, it means that would preclude from putting a retail if you're allowed, or a restaurant or something for curb level appeal. So I'm gonna really agree with the mayor on this one. I think that having this as on the comp plan, which affects everybody, also affects, it's kind of aspirational. So it really affects the intent of how the town's put together. And if we can, in the LDC, we can handle more of the nuance, then I think we should not allow the ground level parking to be counted, or it should count towards FAR.
Thank you. Are you ready, John? You let me know if I tease you too much, all right? I figure you can take it.
Mayor, thanks for what you had to say, and Becky, thank you for what you clarified. That makes it a lot easier. I think I would like to see this fleshed out in the land development code.
Thank you, John. Okay, so the consensus is, that's up to you, Dan, if you want to do that.
Becky,
but-
do we want to just stay consistent and do another vote for the council? Or do we want to just consensus?
I think a consensus on this is fine because you're
Okay.
not
So
talking about
comp plan.
putting it in the comp
Okay.
plan.
Thank you.
So the consensus is that allowing ground floor parking not to count towards FAR will be flushed out in our work with the land development code. Okay. The next item has a little glitch. This is maintain the creation of beach views and view corridors as a priority within the plan. Bill, I'm going to start with you.
No, thanks.
Touche.
I understand that this is in the original comprehensive plan, so it would be a continuation. I have kind of mixed views about mandating view corridors for a couple of reasons. One is that whatever can be seen, wherever you can see the beach can also see you. So that means automobile lights. It means that if you have a way for light to get, it means more houses would be affected by turtle lighting ordinance because now they might be visible from the beach. And the other thing, and one thing I really learned after Ian and, being a trailer dweller is that there's two great losses that really weren't I wasn't expecting after Ian. And one is a lack of privacy, and the other is the lack of a feeling of security. And I think that when you are talking particularly about residences, single-family residences, if you're going to mandate that you can see through to people's backyards, you are mandating that lack of privacy and that lack of security that people feel. I do think that maybe with commercial properties, where it's appropriate, and in public properties, our beach access is what we're going to do with Newton Park, these kind of things. I think that a view corridors is probably a very good idea. But I have real reservations about mandating this on residences where people will feel exposed.
John?
I think Councilor Veach said it well for me.
Okay, thank you. Karen?
I thought maybe where you were going is if you have the open bottom, you see everybody's junk being stored, which is what I think about. I have no problem with side view corridors, but to have the whole underneath exposed and all the bikes and the beach chairs and all the storage things and everything, to me, it's just clutter. So I have no problem with the sides, but I do have a problem with not maintaining some visual blockage of underneath.
How about you, Jim?
Madam Chair, or Anita in the informal way, I think we need to define what we're talking about here a little bit more, because we've hinted at some issues that are next to the Diamond Head. We're talking about, are we talking about side setbacks? We certainly hashed that out over the years at the LPA to try to get some additional view corridors. When you come out of the Publix and you see underneath the condo and you can see the beautiful ocean as you're coming out of the Publix, that to me is appealing. But I think what Councilor Veach talked about mandating, I'm not aware of any mandates per se. That maybe I think we're talking about a wide variety of things here. It's a very broad topic. Could we narrow it down a bit?
Sarah, do you want to comment on that?
Sure. So the intent with this was actually more about the commercial sites and with the street ends. So right now we do have easements that go, that end at the beach. There is language in the code about preserving those views, ensuring that they don't get blocked so that people can see to the water. And also in the downtown zoning district, there's that open view with open space requirement. Wasn't really.
So it's really not in reference to residential.
There wasn't any intent to that.
That's right.
We have over the years had discussions regarding side setbacks and open view. And at the end of the day, what we always end up realizing is that landscaping is going to essentially get in the way, and we don't want to require that people don't have landscaping. So this is really more about the commercial properties and the town-owned properties.
That being the case, where practical and where common sense can prevail, I would support maintaining the creation of beach views and view corridors as a priority within the plan.
Okay, Jane?
Agreed.
I had a conversation with Sarah and Jason about this and suggested that the language specifically refer to publicly owned properties and commercial properties so that it gives beachfront property owners that protection. Dan?
Well, I don't know that I'd want to get that specific. I think maybe just changing the wording to promote instead of maintain view corridors without regulating it to commercial, residential, not requiring it, but promoting it. Because I believe there are some property owners that would want to take advantage of something or take advantage of the view corridors, not just for themselves, but because they love where they live here, as we heard from. So I don't want to restrict it personally to residential, commercial, but I'd like the word promote versus maintain. Just my suggestion.
How about you, Jim?
I think if it was worded as a philosophy, that we would all be in agreement with it, but avoid making a mandate. So I guess along with the lines of what the mayor is saying.
It would be a philosophy because it's a goal of the comp plan. It's in the comprehensive plan, not in the land development code. So it's aspirational. Scott?
Going with that line of thought, I think a big thing is not so much on the ground level, but up top. So if we have more view space, more light between the buildings instead of that canyon effect, I think that'd be one thing that we want to aspire to. And as well as commercial properties on the ground level. I mean, if you pull out of Publix and I guess it's Seaview right across the street, how it's open there, that's awesome. I mean, I think
So is
so
the red
those
coconut.
commercial, yeah, those commercial properties that have that ground level open, that's again why if they give you that vista, I think down the road in the LDC portion, we can give them some more height because quite honestly, when you're standing at that intersection, you don't realize that building's 6 stories or 5 stories, but you can see the beach from that point. And I think we should aspire to have that openness and that light come into Estero. Now, I see your point with the lights on the beach, but there's got to be some kind of compromise there.
Thank you, Scott. How about you, Don?
Agree.
And Doug?
Yeah, it's an interesting discussion. I think wording like the comprehensive plan, maybe wording like incentivize or encourage, like in commercial developments, maybe if somebody's coming in and they want some leeway on the land development code, you say, well, one of the public benefits we're providing is we're going to provide a paved area, maybe even beach access in return for maybe a different shape to our building. So I think I agree with what everybody's saying is, and especially Bill V has a good point. But I think we don't want like Hickory Boulevard, Bonita Beach, where you can't even, now you can't even see the beach. And that's what we're trying. We have setbacks, side setbacks and everything, but I think we could incentivize not only beach views, but maybe beach access in commercial development, not residential.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
just to wrap up, I like the word promote and incentivize. I think those are both excellent words.
I'm just for a step back, because I know there seems to be a lot of conversation about what the comp plan does and what the LDC does. My understanding is you put things in the comp plan, but then you're supposed to go through and back that up with LDC code. So when we do put something in the comp plan, there is an intent that we're going to create the code for that. I know in the past, like there was a lot of things in the housing element from the original comp plan that had never been backed up with LDC code.
Sarah?
So along those lines, when you do your land development code following a comprehensive plan amendment, what you can write land development code language that specifically implements things that were directed in the comprehensive plan, but you can also provide opportunity to, I lost my train of thought, my apologies.
It happens to me all the time.
So when you get a special exception, you get a, I don't think variances refer to the comprehensive plan, CPD or an RPD. The thing that you're looking at is to see if that meets the intent of the comprehensive plan. So sometimes you're going to put something in the comprehensive plan that is like encourage, promote, and that's your opportunity when you get a CPD, when you get an RPD, to say, well, are we meeting the intent of our comprehensive plan? If something you want to do is promote your beach view and somebody comes in with a CPD and they say, we want to have this much view of the beach, we can say, well, that works towards our comprehensive plan. So you don't always write the land development code to implement portions of it. Sometimes it is a way to evaluate proposals that come in. So that's one way to think of that.
How does everybody feel about the 2 words promote and incentivize? You all like it? Okay. So Sarah, do you have clear direction on that?
Yes.
Okay. So we like promote and incentivize the creation of view corridors as a priority within the plan. Okay. Very good. Well, now we know what we know. That's the section that is tied. I didn't mean that to sound so smart assy. All right. Next, does anybody want to take a break? We're going to take a 5-minute break.
I was looking.
Everyone, I know that was more than 5 minutes, but 5 minutes in meeting time, it's like football. Or basketball's even worse. Okay, so we're calling the meeting back to order. And the first item on our list of items for discussion is a biggie: changing transient hotel units from density to FAR, floor area ratio. You know what, Sarah, do you want to start this topic off? Go ahead.
Okay. So this began quite a while back. So the way the current code works, or comprehensive plan and code, it talks about hotel and motel units as density. So you have the base density, which is 6 dwelling units per acre at the highest and 4 dwelling units per acre at the lowest. And the equivalency factor is applied for hotels. That's based on which future land use district you're in and the size of the rooms. So I've heard several people refer to this as bastardized density, which is true. This is not truly density. In most communities, they do not consider hotels and motels to be density, but to consider that as part of intensity, which is floor area ratio. So currently what we're seeing is the vast majority, I think all hotels that we have on the island, all hotels and motels that we had in the past and were destroyed by Ian and currently have on the island, do not meet those equivalency factors. So the way that would work is you have 6 dwelling units per acre for the underlying future land use district, and then you use a multiplier of between 1 to 2.5. I think 2.5 is the highest. So that doesn't get you very much density for hotel rooms. So you end up with far fewer hotel rooms than any hotel or motel on the island actually have. So the idea was that, and we've had a couple conversations around this, and we thought that we had heard that everybody was comfortable switching from that equivalency factor multiplier to floor area ratio for intensity rather than density. But we want to see, does everybody agree with that? And did my explanation make sense? Do you have any additional questions?
That's right. It doesn't give you a picture. So since Mr. Torgerson's in the room, Jason, can you come up? Could we use a real life example so what ends up happening is that in most, again, Scott, I'm sorry, CPDs, that multiplier ends up being a deviation.
Right, so it doesn't have to be a CPD. It could
Okay.
be through a downtown zoning district.
Sure.
The challenge is most of the time you do a CPD because that equivalency factor is so low compared to real world development of hotel rooms. And so I'll give you a couple examples that are out of the comp plan. I can't take ownership of these acreages, but they seem pretty close. And on table 4.4-2 in our comprehensive plan data analysis, it gives examples like Lani Kai, Ramada Inn. Lighthouse Island Resort apparently is 56 units per acre. Outrigger is 37 units per acre. The Best Western apparently is 26 units an acre. Buccaneer Resort was 26. Holiday Inn was 26. Neptune was about 23. I can't confirm the acreages, but they've listed the number of units. Carousel Motel was 17. So what we end up with is a max without a deviation of around 10 to 13 per acre. Because you take your 6 units an acre and you times it by that equivalency factor. And if you use the 2.5 as an example, you don't come anywhere close to what the existing hotels are. And what a standard doing development today, a typical, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a Best Western or something, or new or 85 units to 120 units, and they're on 3 to 5 acres, pretty typically.
Jason, if I may, Madam Chair.
Please.
You talk about the well, I don't know what word you use, but the
Equivalency factor is what the code calls it, yes.
Can you, just for people that may not know how that works, where it's 3, 2, or 1, how that equivalency factor works based on the size of the hotel?
Yeah, so it's a little confusing. There's a couple steps.
It's very confusing
It
for
is.
most people.
It makes sense, part of it. The second part of it doesn't make sense. So I'll try to walk you through that. So It's based on density, or it's based on intensity of where you are. So as Sarah mentioned in the code, it talks about if you're in pedestrian commercial, you get a higher equivalency factor to multiply your density by. The confusing part is the room square footage also factors into that pedestrian or into that calculation. What makes that hard is you may not know I'm going to have 100 rooms of 425 square feet. Or if I have a mixture of room sizes, I can't figure out how to do that calculation. If you have 1,000 square foot room and a couple, as a suite or something, and then you have a couple 600 square foot rooms, and then you have 80 400 square foot rooms, the formula doesn't work. But mostly, I think to answer your question, it's in the higher intensity areas. They were intending to allow a higher multiplier. In the lower intensity areas, like maybe a mixed residential near somewhere in the middle of the island, it might be 1 or 1.5 equivalency factor. And that can all be a deviation from, but that's why you're going to see almost every hotel have to do a deviation from that equivalency factor.
Okay.
Which may be fine. That's the point is, where do you want that line to be where you trigger the CPD? And I think that's actually, I think Scott brought that up. That's all part of this. Ultimately, we're going to get to that land development code, but I think you're missing a middle part where you have a little bit more by right of zoning, but then the threshold for CPD is higher, but maybe you want to leave it as it is. It's entirely up to you guys. But the whole point was, what's in the box?
Is this clear to people?
No. The math of the equivalency is complicated, and we've got to know how many rooms you've got, what the square footages are, all before we even start doing the math to tell you if you fit or not.
And just for clarification, but with the post-disaster build back, people can build back what they had.
Yes, but they're also limited by the square footage of the rooms in the hotel category.
They'd be limited by what they had or by some other number?
By what they had. So you also have, that's what we hear a lot too, is I had small rooms because it was an older hotel. I want to build a more modern, a little bit larger size rooms, and I can't.
Yeah, not only that, but the rules have changed, ADA requirements. So those little 300 square foot rooms, you just can't get around the ADA requirements. So if you had a little boutique hotel with 10 rooms and they're all 300 rooms, the numbers just don't work. I mean, you need.
Well, you get at the other.
There are provisions for additional square footage and whatnot for those specific things, are there not?
For the rooms itself?
For what?
There
like-
are for restrooms and hallways,
Restrooms and
but
hallways.
not necessarily the room.
Correct.
Okay.
So the question was the box that we talked about,
Mhm.
and whatever rooms you can get in there, that's within reason, obviously. And if it's coming to a CPD, you're going to take that into account anyway, how much traffic, how much, all these other things. The question is it let the box determine it or also keep this equivalency factor? So our only concern was the equivalency factor. If you take a percentage of your box, it's not the same ratio as what a normal hotel would be as far as rooms to other stuff. Does that make sense?
Well, man,
Yes.
I think it's as clear as mud.
Yes.
Like you, I have spent countless hours trying to figure out calculations and how you can make this work to be equal across the board for every development or every rebuild. And it's impossible. I mean,
Right. Yes.
it's pretty much impossible. But one thing that is true is that the way it's currently written has worked and does work, or you wouldn't have Margaritavilles, or you wouldn't have people spending $100 million on properties under the current comp plan. My question to you is, if it were, what is the downside of switching it from density to FAR, based on what you've heard here today?
I would interpret what I've heard and what I have heard is a concern about more development because you'll be able to fit more rooms into the box. Now, is that your primary concern? I don't know. I mean, that may be a concern, but there's a lot of other ways to mitigate that through more open space, through other requirements that go in the code, the LDC. But that sounds like from what I've heard from you guys is
Can I
the
go one step
intensity of the
further?
development. Is that the
Yeah,
right way to put
the
it?
intensity of the development.
Yes.
Could I go one step further on what Dan's saying and say, is this another issue like the underneath parking that is really LDC oriented versus comp plan oriented? What's the answer to that question?
It can be, but the equivalency
it's
factor
currently
is
in the-
mentioned in the
in the
comprehensive
comp
plan. And then the code does break out how that number is applied.
Okay.
But the fact that we use an equivalency factor is mentioned in the comp plan. I think we started this just to try to say, can we realign this equivalency factor formula and this FAR formula that could never match?
Mhm.
Is it misleading, right? Can we get them more aligned from what's permitted versus what could be a CPD? That was our attempt, just trying to see if those could get more aligned. That's all we did.
Okay.
Or you
So-
can leave it alone.
But I have a question.
Yep.
And maybe I'm dense, but what is the difference between intensity and density? I mean, aren't they?
Great question.
It's an
Density generally is applied to residential, right? So this town uses residential density per future land use category is the basis to then calculate hotel rooms, right? So no other commercial use has that. If you were doing a restaurant, it's FAR. If you're doing a hotel, I'm in a category that's 6 dwelling units per acre on residential, and then I get this multiplier or equivalency factor to multiply it by to equal my number of rooms. And you also have FAR.
And you also have FAR and you also have height.
Right.
And I think I try to use this building a lot because this is the building why the town incorporated.
Right.
And if you just look at the size and the intensity of this building, ask yourself, do you feel, this is the way I'm speaking about myself. I ask myself, do I feel that I don't know how many rooms are in this building, but let's say they decided to make the rooms half the size and now you have twice as many rooms. Does that have an impact on traffic? Does it have an impact on how many toilets that are flushing? Does that, so that's how I try to make it work in my mind.
Right.
And it goes back to what you said. At the end of the day, do we care what fits inside the box or don't we? And that is the ultimately discussion. And to me, I look at this building and imagine if they doubled it, would I be okay with that?
So you do care what's in the box.
I personally care, but
Okay.
I just threw it out there that
The one
That's
thing
But
that I
shouldn't
would,
residential and commercial be totally separate
They
in
are.
calculation? Okay.
So isn't it fair to say that we only really talk about intensity relative to commercial development?
Generally speaking, yes. So to Karen's point though, if you did a mixed use project, we had residential and commercial
you
uses,
go.
you would get both. You would get FAR and you would get your residential density. You still have to fit in the box. So if it was 1 or 1.5, you still have to fit in that box. It gets a little complicated on that mixture when you start doing hotel rooms because you're using residential number, the density, to calculate your hotel room. Do you now lose residential units because you picked hotel? And the plan's honestly not clear on that. But any other commercial use, you would get both. You'd get your total commercial square footage and your residential, and if it fits in the box.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think you're about ready to go to an example that I think could be illustrative to help explain this point. Were you going to yield to somebody who's actually lived through this?
I was going to ask permission to yield to someone who's lived through
I
this.
think it could be helpful.
So
yeah.
since Mr. Torgerson's in the room, if you all would like a real example that Jane, I don't know who else in the room might have lived through the Margaritaville process, but I think it would be helpful to understand something that actually happened. This is totally unplanned, but what do you all think about that? Would you like, if Tom's willing to do that? Are you
Well-
willing to do that, Tom? I know that puts you on the spot, but all we're going to talk about is that you don't have to talk about all the nitty gritty, ugly details that okay. Do you hear that, Tom? Because you know he can
Just
get
how it
long.
worked, how it
He
worked.
can get long. Just that one element.
Come on, he needs his voice. He's got the podium.
I appreciate it. It's just, it's an elephant in the room and you happen to be a good elephant to use as an example.
as long as she doesn't take one bite at a time.
This-
Yeah. It's a quagmire a bit because you could say that, and as Jason has said, and I can't refute it, that the density system that's in place currently for transient resort motel lodging is very restrictive. Although it can be, there can be deviations, and it provides the town a tool to negotiate, let me say, incentives to public benefit that really help the community. Now, you could say, let's hypothetically remove density from the lodging transient calculation. As to what you can do, you actually, in my opinion, you can make your own opinions, but you got a much bigger problem on your hands, because I will tell you right now, the FARs that are in place on this island are atrocious. They're big compared to what I think most people in this room think can be accomplished in this island. Most people have no idea the massing that can occur on this island if you remove this density from.
So that density calculation acts as a gatekeeper for FAR.
That's right. So for example, Margaritaville, Sarah was talking about the district, and it's in, I think, Sarah, the highest density, or not density, I should say intensity, right?
Yes, highest intensity.
Intensity district, maybe, capable of going up to 2.5. Margaritaville, I have the numbers here. If you calculate it one of two ways, one with parking below flood and one without, you'll come up with two different answers, but they're pretty close to each other, actually. I think it's 1.5 FAR if you include parking below flood, and it's a little under 1.0 if you exclude parking below flood. So if you look at only FAR, and Margaritaville only had the restriction of FAR as to how big it could be, how many units it could be, instead of 254 rooms, the math comes out to 625. So I think we need to recognize in processing what you have in front of you right now, how generous the FAR is on this island that's in place, that you're not changing, but it's already in place.
Tom, can I stop you for a second?
Sure.
Could you share with this group how the town, if you don't want to, that's okay, but how this element, this element and the town granting you a deviation from the multiplier helped the town negotiate the Margaritaville development for the public benefits that ultimately it inherited?
It had 100% to do with every bit of negotiating the public benefits, not a little bit, 100%. So the infamous, one of our neighbors, I shouldn't say people's names, but would publicly and in the newspaper declare, you're giving, well, it wasn't Margaritaville at the time, it was TPI-FMB, 3 times the density that they're allowed by right. And that's true. There was a deviation that granted Margaritaville, that project, 3 times the density it was allowed under the current in-place standards or restrictions. But again, it only computes out to, depending upon which method you do, less than 1.0 FAR or 1.4 FAR if you include parking. Can you imagine if that wasn't there again, and you go only with FAR and all of a sudden becomes 625 rooms?
The reason I asked Tom that question is because if you think about the developments that have been approved in the last 28 years, this one little item, every single developer has complained about it. But with every single development, it was a tool for the town to achieve the best possible product. And if you're looking to negotiate or craft an end result like Margaritaville, where we got a parking lot, we got right of way, we got landscaping, we got infrastructure, all those things were because of this negotiation.
Madam Chair, if I could take that one step further, I think negotiate is a word that people are using,
Yeah, I
but
hate that too. I always say to Jim, don't use that word.
But
And
what I
just
think,
use-
what gets lost in this, and I won't speak for Tom, but the ability for our constituents to have a voice. If you change the way this is done, using your example, it would be 625 rooms.
you take away the voice of the community to be able to opine on whether or not they are comfortable with that much. And I think that's the biggest issue that I have and have had with this, is that you're taking away the people that have put us up here to speak for them. You've taken away their voice and just inherently given something away without hearing from them first.
Does this make this any clearer? It
The
does?
FAR is extremely generous on this island. If you use that as the restrictor on this island, it's going to get really big.
Is that a little better, Jim?
I appreciate everything I'm hearing. I just so we can understand better, Tom, you said that your detractors were saying you were given 3 times.
Mhm.
Is that an equation that's in the LDC? And is that the maximum that we can give in terms of?
No,
Okay.
you could give more.
So that was determined based upon the public benefit you were granting in return?
Exactly.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
Just
you
trying
could
to
give more,
understand
you
better.
could give less.
All right, thank you.
You can hate me for this later, but thank you, Tom. I thought that was helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions for Jason on this? Is it still uncertain? Okay, it's just Jason, just stay there. Let's just see what everybody says. Don, you're leaning in. Do you have a comment on this?
No, I was probably just leaning, just shifting in my seat. Thank you.
They're so comfortable.
No comment, but it just, again, it argues for, why would we change anything?
Why would we change it?
Right. I mean, we have a tool and we should continue to.
Could I just
keep
interrupt
tool.
that for a second too? Becky, this SB 250 that I despise at this moment, which for you all, so Dan, you explain it. You explained it to me. You understand it far better.
Well, first, there are some things in this Senate Bill 250 that are good, but there are
Don't
some.
talk about those. Talk about the
Some
one
are
that
bad.
irritates me at this point.
But essentially what it says is local municipalities cannot make building more restrictive
Or burdensome.
or burdensome.
Or burdensome.
And that is not what we're doing here. We are talking about potentially making it completely the opposite. Siri's got something to say. I mean, that's the general synopsis of what
Yeah.
exactly it says.
And if we were to change this at this moment, we couldn't unchange it.
Well, not until October of 2024.
If they don't continue it.
If they don't continue it.
Okay.
Or make it.
Or make it
or
worse.
Make it permanent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Doug, do you have comments on this?
I'm glad that invited Mr. Torgerson to help explain it, because I was sort of struggling with it, but I get it now. So it seems to me like leave it like it is.
Okay.
If I could say something also, it's not just SB 250, it's Bert Harris.
Sure.
So, if you give people something now, either the comp plan or your land development code, and then decide later to take it away,
yeah.
better
like
be
that.
there with a lot of money.
Scott, do you have a comment on this one?
Again, I think there's got to be a way for the smaller properties. And is there a way to change just how bastardized it is right now to make it so we don't have a 600 unit hotel? I think that's what everybody's fear is, right?
Yeah.
So how do you make it easier for, again, Jason was saying the mid-level? 'Cause it seems like it's all or nothing, right?
Yes, that's the issue. I think ultimately we as staff saw that the number that's a perceived cap of that 2.5 is a very low number compared to any realistic. And so it triggers any hotel into a CPD. And if that's how to deal with those uses, that's fine. It's just, there's a big gap between that. And then obviously, like Tom was talking about, he went up in FAR, he needed a higher multiplier. That's why he ended up in the CPD process. Where is that line where you trigger CPD versus just regular zoning? That's, I think, ultimately,
It seems like it's smaller than an anthill right now. I mean, it's everything triggers the CPD. And I'm fighting for the little guy because I'm a little guy. But I think there's enough smart people in this room to figure out how do we raise that anthill to maybe a speed bump or something, because it just seems like it's an all or nothing deal. And that's my 2 cents.
Okay.
And I think Scott's property was an example that we've used at the LPA before, frankly, and I don't want to keep using it, but I think you had 2 800 square foot rooms or something. You had 2 large rooms.
We had
And in
one
theory,
large room.
the fear is you split those and you get more rooms in the building like this, but in a small building like that, it's 2 more units. Is that okay, right? That's what we asked a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. Think about that. Is it okay to have this incremental little bit of infill kind of thing versus 600 rooms? or
So
400
let me
rooms?
ask to follow up on that. Is there a way through, not going through the comp plan, but through the LDC, where you cap it at a boutique level of 40 or 50 units?
But 40 or 50 units in Jason's example goes from 40 or 50 to
No,
80
you
or
cap,
100.
so like 25 goes to 50. Like you
25
cap
goes to
it
50.
at that boutique, whatever that boutique level is. I don't, I'm just throwing out
Whatever,
ideas.
throwing a number up.
The comprehensive plan only says that the land development code should do this. There is a lot of flexibility regarding how this could be done within the land development code. But, the main question is, do we want to keep this way of counting motel densities? And, if so, we can be directed to do just something different in the land development code to make it maybe right-sized.
Okay.
Is there a way to
There's your
do it?
answer.
Is it all or nothing? You either do it the bastardized way we have it or FAR, or is there? Because right now there's in between. I mean, people are always asking you, asking me, asking Dan, asking everybody, what can I build back? And you're like, I don't know. So there's got to be easier way to do this that doesn't create the monstrosities, right?
There's plenty of communities that use size, scale, all those cutoff. I worked in the Keys a lot, and they have a 50,000 square foot for building cutoff for certain things. Trying to keep that community character, that's what their goal is. So there's lots of techniques and ways to do that in the code. It's just a matter of, 1, do you want to, and change it? And then 2, what is that threshold ultimately?
So that is the question. Do we want to change this in the comp plan? Yes or no? So far, it's no. Scott's asking, is there another way to handle this? And you're suggesting it could be handled. There could be something else in the LDC that could help a smaller property, for example.
Correct.
Okay.
There's only one thing that's in the comp plan that is it's a cap, but it's not a cap. And
Okay.
it's what Tom was kind of referring to. It talks about the 3
Yep.
multiplier. Anything over that has to have this special, unique, public component, blah, 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 right? So that whole stuff. That's in there. If that was going to be moved, it needs to be moved in the comp plan. But if it was a different way to do the calculation, certain things might be exempt, we could do that in the LDC.
Okay.
And I just, if I might just have a quick question for
Yeah.
Jason. Just out of curiosity, when someone does a CPD, and I understand they're kind of burdensome processes, is the charge, the permit fees that we're charging for a CPD, are they the same regardless of the scale of the project?
There is a scale component to it. There's, if they kept it the same from last time I looked at it, I think there was an additional fee by acreage.
Okay.
We didn't have a lot of large acreages. So I think it was like anything over an acre or for every acre over 1, I had to pay an extra $800 or something like that. So there was a scale component to that base fee, yes.
And what was the base fee?
I don't know what it is now. I think it's 3,800 or something like that.
$3,800.
Yes. Which honestly, frankly, most CBs, it doesn't cover the town's cost. So
It's $1,000 more than my fence. Just saying. I know, I'm just saying, but.
No bitterness
I
there.
would note that I would note that a lot of the costs that people refer to in the CPD is you have to do a lot
Absolutely.
of
Thank you, Bill. How about you, John?
As is.
I'm as is too. So on this item, I think we've been pretty clear that we're not going to change it in the comp plan. We're going to look for other solutions within the LD. The agenda is discussing the location and size of the activity centers, also known as nodes, pockets, whatever. What to protect, what to keep, what to move. And we kind of want to talk on options A or B. Do we change boundaries or remove any of these quote activity centers? Or B, do we simply, which I'll tell you is how we're leaning, do we streamline our existing districts by increasing the uses available in those districts? Sarah?
So this item, originally when the comp plan began, the consultant came up with the concept of nodes to make most of the neighborhoods more put most neighborhoods within walking distance of some activity centers. So those would be areas that would have slightly higher density, slightly higher intensity. These would be places where you could have restaurants, you could have additional uses that aren't currently allowed in most of the zoning districts that are along Estero Boulevard. Currently, the way the zoning districts work, the downtown district and the Santini district are the only districts where you can have a new restaurant.
Yep.
The other districts do not allow restaurants. So this has been an issue for some number of years. The way we went about looking at how this could be amended was by creating these activity nodes. They're all within walking distance of most of the neighborhoods. The idea was that these would be more intensive districts where there would be more mixed use encouraged. And then people wouldn't have to get on Estero to go downtown or go to Santini to get to their favorite restaurant or bar.
Mhm. Yes, go ahead, Dan.
Just to try to provide a little background on what started this discussion and speaking with Sarah and Jason, you know, Bill and Jim and I were on council when we first started these conversations back in the day. And it's my belief that the intent was obviously pre-Ian was to try to incentivize people in areas to offer some sort of things to spread, to keep with the comp plan and create bikeability, walkability, things like that. Obviously, a lot has changed since those initial conversations. And I believe the intent is still there to uphold the comp plan and incentivize or promote walkability, bikeability, coffee shops, whatever it is throughout the entire Estero Boulevard. But I don't believe the intent, as we have heard today, is to allow more than what is there. I agree with Anita. I think that looking at it through B's eyes, I think achieves the intent of what we set out to do back when we first started talking about these nodes, but still allows people, I mean, it's a different type of incentive. Now they could have a use in an area. We heard Jason say many, many times, a bank can only be a bank. Imagine if that bank could have been a coffee shop or a restaurant or a bookstore or something. That I think is what we're talking about here, if I'm not mistaken. That is what we're talking about, is allowing more uses within the zoning districts that we currently have. And I don't necessarily see that there's a need to have to create new districts when we have the ability currently through our land development code comp plan to allow uses within those zones that we don't currently have. Those are my 2 cents.
Does that make sense to everybody? John, you're looking like what?
Help me with expanding boundaries then.
So there's this little wonky chart that I know you don't have. You know what? Will you pass this down to John? Pass that down, John. This little chart is existing right now, and it defines the zoning districts pretty much says what you can do there, whether or not something is limited, which limited, Sarah, stop me if I say something wrong, okay? Limited would be, I'm going to use Seagrape Plaza, or let's just specifically use the Wachovia Bank Building. It's limited right now where it sits. It's limited in nature. It's can only stay a bank because it's in that zone. But what we're saying is, instead of making that a whole node, increasing all sorts of things, why don't we just increase those uses? So those uses and allowed them in other categories, we're kind of doing the same thing without making additional changes. Sarah, do you want to add or subtract from what I just said?
No, I think you covered it in a way that makes a lot of sense.
Okay. So when something is open, Sarah, explain the dots. So if something is open, it means that you can do that. You can do that use.
Type of use. So we've got residential are restricted, I believe, and you're allowed to have, no, that's limited. I apologize. So what's the middle one called? L. Okay, so that's limited. So I guess it's restricted, limited, open.
Correct.
Restricted, you get the lowest level of intensity. You get a single family residence rented at 1 month. For the next level, you would get a duplex and you could have 1 rental per week. And then the next would be you're allowed more density than that, more intensity than that, and more rentals per week. So basically, the scale just gets allows you more uses as it becomes more open. So that exists across all of the uses. And for example, in retail open or retail restricted allows almost nothing. I think it allows an ATM. Then limited allows a few more things. It isn't until you're open that you're allowed to have a restaurant or a retail store. So if you're anything other than open in retail, you can't have a store and you can't have a restaurant. So it's just very limiting.
Okay, but maybe this is my density, but this is boundaries, changes to boundaries. Help me understand why that would not be a good thing in some districts. That's what I was asking.
I mean,
and trying to
I'm not sure
understand.
what meetings you guys have been in, but of
So-
all the things that were said in his presentation, Eddie's, the one takeaway that everybody loved was the node concept. I don't know how the B even got in here because it was everybody. I mean, Lee Harkins was up here the other day saying, this would be great. I don't have to drive down to Clean Slate. We can create these nodes where people can walk or bike. You guys are going through a chart. It looks like you're taking a calculus class.
No, go ahead, Jason.
We talked about this, so I think it's a better way to explain it. The nodes concept is the commercial part of it. There's a couple nodes, and to his question, have expanded the area. So Santini Plaza, the area that is commercial, mainly commercial, on the proposed map has expanded. So that's one of the questions. To your point about the nodes, our original conversation about the nodes was actually allowing more intensity and density in that node than what is allowed in the plan today. So that goes back to whatever the original conversation, do you want to do that? So I think part of the question is, do we need to create these nodes? We already have nodes, okay? Santini, downtown, you already have a concept of that. Do we need these nodes if you're not going to increase in density intensity? You have a natural commercial area. We're back to, if your answer is no intensity increase, we're back to letting the additional uses in those areas. And do you want to expand the boundaries of those? So if you look at the map on the back wall on the right side, the one on the fourth one to the right, Santini includes across the street, across Estero Boulevard. If you look on the original map, it only includes on the, I guess, east side, north side, whatever that is, on the one side. So it's really two different questions. And I think you've answered the density intensity part of it from a how many units per acre and how much FAR. Am I correct?
I wouldn't use the word think.
I'm pretty sure, I'm pretty confident that you took that vote. And so then the question is, you can achieve some additional node components with more uses. And do you want to expand or constrict those boundaries of what we proposed? So this is the point where we want you to look at the parcels that are in those maps and say, that parcel doesn't make any sense to be in this activity center, or it does, or we missed one. That's the boundary question.
But I just to point out that, and also the commercial boulevard, and we have these nodes already.
Right.
They were growing up, they came up organically, that are across the street here and down by, by the Catholic Church.
So the activity center, the goal of the activity centers or nodes was to differentiate themselves from the boulevard category, because that's the in-between. The node in between the nodes is leftover is a commercial boulevard category. If you're not doing density intensity changes, then you're left with commercial boulevard. And then it's a question, do you allow more uses and or do you change those boundaries? There's some mixed residential on that map, current map, that is proposed for Santini node. Is that appropriate?
And I think to your point, Jason, is what you're talking about, we'll just pick anywhere on the map, doesn't matter where it's at. If let's say, we'll use the Munch Box, for instance. It can build back if we allow uses changes. It could build back a restaurant on the first level and have residential above it. So it's accomplishing what the intent, I believe, was with the direction given to the Cordino Group like 2 years ago, or whatever it was. We're achieving that without increasing the mass or increasing the density. So we're achieving, I think, exactly to your point, we're allowing more uses within an area, but the discussion now is, well, both are discussions, but part of that discussion is, do we want to expand like Santini up to across the street from where it is now? So it still stay Santini,
right?
But the borders are just a little bit bigger. So we're not just recreating we're not creating new zoning districts. We're creating a bigger area within the Santini Village District.
Yes, in some cases, exactly. In other cases, it's, do you want to keep it the way it was, the boundary it was, and then also allow more uses? You can do both.
So what happened to the area that originally, a year ago when he came up with that was by the women's club, that
was pulled out per the direction of our conversations. And this is kind of where we run into an issue over the last 2 years is, as we go, somebody recognizes, oh, this parcel doesn't belong. And then another person says, well, maybe this parcel belongs. So we want you all to try to figure out and finalize these boundaries.
I mean, the Publix area, the Publix area, we had talked, Sable was on there. I mean, I like how it's smaller now.
Yes.
But
So we're looking for that final direction of those boundaries. And if there's something that sticks out that doesn't belong or should belong, that's what we need. But then the even bigger question, I think, ultimately is uses and how do we address these nodes?
Should we go to the map, just as Scott's just bringing up Publix, should we go to those maps and look at the maps section by section and say, do we leave this like this or do we change it? Do you want us to do that?
You can. I mean, yes, I think the big thing is, oh my goodness, you missed a 3-acre parcel that makes 100% sense to have.
If we're going to address it in the LDC, why would we need to change the boundaries? Why wouldn't we just leave them like they are? We could take a property.
So
like
we've
7-Eleven.
proposed a new category,
Okay.
right? And what we don't want to do is have a bunch of categories that are the same. And so we're almost back to, and just Scott, I think this answers your question, do we need to create a new category that's this node? Or can commercial or can Boulevard serve that purpose and just modify the zoning districts within that category?
So yeah, I would point out that we have several future land use districts that were created, and they're all that teal color up there. And the Times Square is essentially the current downtown area. And then we've got Coconut Village mixed use. We've got Center Island mixed use, Theater Arts mixed use, Santini Village mixed use.
And that's it.
And that's it. Yep. So, do we still want those? Because they did have the higher density intensity of the downtown. So the concept was that it was going to sort of match with the intensity of the downtown, but in smaller areas, but then after the conversation, it sounds as if we're, moving away from increased intensity and density, but do we still want them to be their own district? Does that make sense to have its own future land use district, but we could really just keep the existing future land use district and change the underlying zoning?
Becky, can I ask you a question? I'm looking at you and you look like you want to say something. Does it make sense legally to make changes if we can just make changes to the uses? And they could, if it's through the land development code, it could be changed 10 years from now. It could be changed 15 years from now. It could be changed next year.
Yeah, I think that's a lot safer at this point, particularly until we get over the hump of SB 250. Because if we were to take something away from somebody, not only would we have Bert Harris, but it would be probably considered void ab initio, which means
It would
we're
be
doing
considered what?
nothing. It's, well, the SB 250 says that if you create in an area that is within 100 miles, obviously, of Ian or Nicole, if you create either a change in the land development code or the comp plan or the procedures that you use, and if it's more burdensome or less or more restrictive on the use, then it is void ab initio, which means it was void from the beginning.
Okay.
So you don't want to go down that path, particularly, don't take anything away. And if you have a question as to whether you want to grant somebody something, it's safer to do it on a one-on-one with a CPD or whatever, or a development agreement with deviations if y'all decide to do that. Because you can't go back on those things, because if you give somebody more and you think, oh, that was a mistake, we need to undo that, then you essentially, for all intents and purposes, you bought that property for a whole lot of money, and that's not a good path to go down.
Okay.
So the nodes serve a purpose with the new categories. If you want to restrict those new uses to only was either Santini as an example or Boulevard. So some Boulevard is proposed to go to a activity center. If you want to go back and let the Boulevard do it with the uses, that's fine. You may want to geographically restrict how much those new uses, where they can go. Does that make sense? So a smaller area than just the Boulevard. That would be a reason to keep these new colors and new category. If you're okay with where the Boulevard is, generally speaking, with just making those uses more flexible, then that's a way to do it too. And most of the Boulevard it was really written to protect existing uses. Existing shopping centers, make them frozen kind of in time. And that's the issue that we run into with uses coming in and out of those.
Okay, Jim, did you opine on this? You opined, leave it be. No, or did you?
I haven't done that.
Okay, well, go ahead. Let us know what your thoughts are.
it would seem that if we're expanding the boundaries, we are giving someone a right that, as pointed out, becomes a potential liability if we don't follow it. So I guess I would think that it would be more prudent to add additional uses to the categories than changing the boundaries.
Okay. Dan? Or, I'm sorry. Did Doug, did I not ask you? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I have not opined yet. So, just want to make sure I get this straight. When we're talking about changes to the boundaries, we're talking about adjustments to the draft plan that we've all
Yeah,
seen.
the aqua, is that aqua, whatever that color is, yes,
Yeah.
teal. Yeah.
And I think there's already been some changes based on previous meetings, which is great. I know we got some correspondence and stuff to the LPA of people that were kind of against creating these nodes, but it may be the way they were presented. I mean, I think that the concept of the nodes, which we already sort of have on the island, I think everybody likes. But I know when I first saw some of them, I'm like, well, wait a minute, my house is now in a commercial zone. What's going on? So I didn't know what it meant. I don't know if it opened up some developer coming in and buying up our street or what. So I can see why people are concerned about it. But I think I'm personally happy with the zones that have been defined currently. And, it does make, I know the goal of it is to have a more pedestrian type of community. I understand that. I think you just have to be kind of concerned with how it's presented to people where they think somebody's changing their land use or something, which I don't think we are, but I also recognize that what was said earlier, that, we can just change the use of the existing nodes
Correct.
and not necessarily have to define anything that might be hard to rescind later, which I think that Senate Bill 250 is kind of a cautionary thing. So I'm hesitant to, like, say, add things to the plan that's going to entrap us if we decide it didn't work out. So.
Okay, do you want to speak now?
Sure. Did Scott did it?
Scott spoke.
All right. I think I've made my points enough. I support updating the uses within the current zones for the reasons that you have stated as well.
So let me ask you a question, playing devil's advocate. Will just increasing the uses reduce traffic and increase development or encourage development? I mean,
you're asking me?
Yeah, I'm not.
I think it potentially could, sure. And using the Munchbox as an example. If they could build back a restaurant at the first level and have a bookstore on the second level and residential on the third floor, I think that promotes what the comp plan is trying to achieve. I think it promotes building. I think it gives more options to developers to be able to get a return on their investment, and it protects the property rights of the owners that surround that building.
Jane, your thoughts?
I'm for expanding the uses and doing it that way because I think it's a easier mode to expand what can be used on that property and eliminate things that, like Arts and Theater has a very long node there, and all we've ever had is our little art center, and in the 34 years I've been here, I've been there twice. So I think it would, just 2 times, that maybe the art center is perfect where it is and have something that is going to be used by more people on a daily basis to keep people out of their cars makes more sense. So that I would say open the uses up.
Jim?
Yeah, I'm okay with expanding uses. And again, either A or B, the devil's in the details. I do think if we do go to B, which is an interesting approach, I think we have a challenge as a town to really reach out to our citizenry and inform them of what these various designations are and what the zoning is and what the proposed zoning is. Because I think these maps are very difficult to find, and I think they've been evolving. And so nobody really knows what the current map is. And so I think if we do take this course, I think we have a real an obligation to the citizenry to make it known to them, but also to solicit their input as well.
Thank you. Karen?
I'm kind of looking at a hybrid. I mean,
She wants a hybrid.
Yeah, I mean, I agree to expand the uses. I loved the concept of the nodes as it was originally presented. Maybe not as many nodes as were presented, but if you just look at like the original areas that we have right now, like a Santini or arts and theater or whatever that may be, if we had better usage in those areas, I'm not necessarily in agreement to bring it over across to the beach. We have our downtown district, that's both sides. That's all walkable, that kind of thing. Somehow we need to incorporate more walkable, but not make it so big that it interferes with residential. Because if you look at a lot of these maps and what's here, there's residential right behind, like the arts and theater.
Yeah.
That all butts up to residential, So keep that the same, don't be expanding, maybe expand the use, but not the boundaries of it. So if I just have to vote on B, A or B, I'm open to expanding the uses, but I think we also need to look at some of the boundaries.
Okay. Bill?
Yeah, I would just say, to me, the CB zoning district is pretty much operating in a node, and I think that the use has been very restrictive. I don't agree to expand these boundaries at all because I think the small boundaries of the existing CB zoning district and the Santini and whatnot already have that scale that's more appropriate to our town than making it bigger and allowing bigger projects to go in. I would say, though, that having the granularity of treating all these a little separately would allow us to make sure that we put in what's appropriate for the neighborhood. So if some places, like if we decide we don't want to allow more transient housing next to a school in Bay Oaks, so we don't want to allow bigger projects that will be allowed next to areas that abut with the low density units that will allow us that granularity. The arts and theater district, I think is the name was probably put in there before the beach theater when it was going to go away. So I don't know if we could, if we're going to divide this out, maybe we can come up with a different name for that. But I like the idea of being able to have a little more granularity about what happens in these different nodes.
And John?
I was kind of thinking along what Karen was saying about maybe a hybrid of both, but I definitely want to see an update and a streamlining of the existing districts. However, then I'm torn by an email I got where, and to the vice mayor's point, maybe we haven't done a good job of explaining it, but people didn't know what the heck a theater district was or arts and theater district. So